Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Jasodanandana Vrajajanaranjana Jasodanandana Vrajajanaranjana Jamanathiravana Shadi Yamunathiravana Shadi Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Jasodanandana Vrajajanaranjana Jasodanandana Vrajajanaranjana Jamanathiravana Shadi Jamunathiravana Shadi Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Madhava Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jayom Vishnupada Paramahamsa Harilajikacharya Ashtatara Satasi Simad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Gaura Premanandi. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. I would like to continue with the reading that I've been doing in morning classes for the past several months, reading from Uddhava Gita. And this morning is Canto 11, Chapter 11, Text 21. And I'll just read the verse, do a little background, and then we'll go to some commentaries. The verse reads, "Coming to this conclusion of all knowledge, one should give up the false conception of material variety that one imposes upon the soul, and thus cease one's material existence. The mind should be fixed on me, since I am all-pervading." So some background that leads up to this. Uddhava Gita begins with chapter 7 of Canto 11. And going back to chapter 6 of Canto 11, there's several, like 6 parts, but it's Krishna's preparing to leave. Going back some time further, Krishna has already been to Vrindavan, made arrangements for the eternal associates of Krishna to enter into their aprakat lila, and for the purpose of appearances, Krishna had a vimana descend and take them to the spiritual world, Goloka Vrindavan, his eternal associates, the demigods, or their partial manifestations of those demigods who were assisting in Krishna's pastimes. They returned to their planets in the heavenly realm. And then Krishna went to Dwaraka to finish his pastimes in Dwaraka. There's several things that happened. Narada is in Dwaraka, and Vasudeva invites Narada to come to speak to him about transcendental knowledge. 2 chapters, chapters 4 and 5. Narada's instructions in transcendental knowledge. And there's a theme that comes in this Uddhava Gita, and before even Uddhava Gita, is knowledge and detachment, Jnana Vairagya. It's a standard couplet that's found in all of the Vedic teachings, knowledge and detachment. Now there's the Gyan kind that leads to impersonal. And then there's the Bhakti kind that leads to Bhakti, or taking shelter, unobstructed shelter of Krishna. And that's what the reference is in this verse. Coming to this conclusion of all knowledge. So this conclusion of all knowledge means the devotional conclusion of all knowledge, not the impersonal. So going back to 4 and 5, chapters 4 and 5, Narada's giving it. Vasudeva is not a neophyte. He's Krishna's eternal associate. But he's speaking knowledge and detachment. Chapter 6 begins with a misfortune. But misfortune turns out to be good fortune. The misfortune is, as you know, the story, Samba, well, the beginning is Vasudeva, having Narada's association, is very enlivened. He arranges a yajna at his home or palace. Many brahmanas come. They do the yajna. Vasudeva, rewards them, gives bountiful benedictions to them and gifts and so forth. They all disperse. They go to a nice place, apart from Dwaraka, but not so far. And Samba and the boys of Dwaraka come and offend the Brahmanas. And the Brahmanas make a curse. This so-called child underneath the sari of Samba will bring the destruction of the Yadu dynasty. The boys go to Ugrasena. Ugrasena checks with his ministers what to do. The ministers say, grind that iron into powder, throw it in the sea. So that's done. They throw it in the sea. The powder washes up to the shore in Prabhas, and then later there's a annihilation of the Yadu dynasty members by the Yadu dynasty. So that's chapter 6, and it's not over yet. Krishna is alone in some remote place in Dwarka. The demigods come, offer beautiful prayers to Krishna, and like they offered prayers in Canto 10, Chapter 2, here it's Canto 11, Chapter 6, they offer prayers to Krishna. And the conclusion of those prayers is, you fulfilled your promise, you've annihilated the demons, and if you so desire, you can return to your eternal abode. And they depart. Chapter 6 continues. Krishna is alone, and he begins to contemplate, the stage is set for my departure, and the Yadu dynasty is to be relieved from this earth, the curse of the Brahmanas is there, etc. And there's just one thing that I have remaining. I want to give instructions to Uddhava. He just thinks, Vidya Shakti, he desires to give Uddhava instructions that he can then carry to the sages of Narayan Rishi and Badrinath, because when I appeared in this world, I didn't go there to give my association to them. He can go on my behalf. And the second is these teachings I'll give him. He can travel here and there and pass on my teachings. The purpose of Krishna's teachings is to bring one to Krishna. And then chapter 6 ends, Uddhava comes, because Krishna desired him to come meet and send a messenger. And he falls at Krishna's feet saying, I know you're going to leave, please take me with you. And then second request is the theme of the whole Uddhava Gita. And the question is, how do I want to know you without obstruction, but there's impediment or obstruction, and it's my attachment to the temporary. That's our situation. Uddhava doesn't have that problem, but he's speaking as if he has that problem. It's to teach us, Krishna is having him feel like this and speak like this, to teach us how to go from having some knowledge about Krishna, but go beyond just having knowledge about Krishna and become squeaky clean, become unobstructed bhakti, Shuddha bhakti. So that's Uddhava Gita. It's the same as Bhagavad Gita taken further, or it's the graduate study of Bhagavad Gita. So that was the question that ends chapter 6. And then chapters 7, 8, and 9 is Krishna's answer. Knowledge and detachment, knowledge and detachment, knowledge and detachment. The flow is very nice, but rather than going, a big part of those 3 chapters is Krishna speaks to Uddhava about a conversation between their ancestor, King Yadu, because their followers, they're in the line of Yadu, the Yadu Vamsa, both of them. So one of our ancestors, King Yadu, had a conversation with an Avadhuta Brahmin. And the Avadhuta Brahmin was asked by King Yadu, how did you become so detached? Spot on example. And so it's many, many lessons on knowledge and detachment for the purpose of knowing Krishna unobstructedly. And then chapter 9, so that was, 7, 8, 9. Chapter 10 is Krishna expanding on that. Like temporary means temporary, so don't make the mistake that some people make of wanting to go to heavenly planets, because that's also temporary, and so forth and so on. The different options he dismisses. So it's knowledge of detachment, 4.5 chapters. 7, 8, 9, 3.5, and half of 10. Then Uddhava asked a question that gets chapter 11 started. I have heard that one who is Nityabhadha can become Nityasiddha. How is that? Seems contradictory. Because Nitya means Nitya, and if you're Nityabhadha, then how do you become Nityasiddha? And Krishna's answer is very interesting. Krishna says, your question is misleading. That's not exactly his words, but that's what he's saying. Because just like the soul is pure, and as I am pure, I don't become, and the soul similarly doesn't become liberated. The soul is pure, 10% pure, like I am. As I don't become liberated, the soul doesn't become liberated. That's a designation, this verse here. One should give up the false conception of material variety that one imposes upon the soul, including, we think of the conceptions of life imposed upon the soul to be, I'm American or Indian or black or white or tall or short or whatever. Those are upadhis. We know that very well from our ISKCON training. This is going further. Another upadhi is liberated or conditioned. So the question was Nityasiddha, Nityabhadha. Krishna says that Baddha is due to the influence of avidya, and Siddha is due to the influence of, Baddha is the influence of avidya, and Siddha is the influence of Vidya, but these two, Vidya and avidya, they're potencies of Maya Shakti. And when Maya Shakti superimposes something on the soul, it's not, the soul is pure. There's no becoming liberated because the soul is pure. It's just movements of Maya Shakti superimposing itself on the jiva. Interesting concept. Then he goes over to the internal potency, different than Maya Shakti, is the Antaranga Shakti. And that Antaranga Shakti has, as we know, Satchitananda. So Chit potency is there, or the spiritual Vidya potency is there. And the living entity needs to connect with the spiritual potency. And the medium of that connecting with the spiritual potency is bhakti. And built within bhakti is transcendental knowledge that's beyond the scope of the vidya, avidya potencies of Maya. It's not something we're accustomed to hearing in the Hare Krishna movement, but it's there in chapter 11. So he goes kind of back and forth, Krishna, between Gyan Yoga, Gyan Mishra Bhakti, and Shuddha Bhakti. And does this going back and forth, comparing this is this and that's that, and it's subtle. But the goal, because Uddhava wants Shuddha Bhakti, or Krishna wants us to understand how to achieve Shuddha Bhakti. So he's having Uddhava ask those questions, and Krishna is doing it. He's giving the answer back and forth and back and forth. And this verse is, one should, having understood this knowledge, which is, the bhakti knowledge, beyond the Vidya Shakti kind of knowledge, but fixed upon the lotus feet of Krishna. He says if one is there, one has achieved that Shuddha Bhakti, the mind is fixed on me. If one has not achieved that yet, he gives two prescriptions. Work in the world, same as chapter 6, Bhagavad Gita. Work with offering the fruits to me. And hear about me. Because that will hearing about me will purify the mind. Offering the fruits of your work will purify the mind. When the mind is purified, then you'll have unobstructed contemplation upon me. You're prepared for karma sannyas, or entering into samadhi, where you're doing, but you're not doing for the purpose of becoming purified. When purified, you do with contemplation upon Krishna's service. That's Shuddha Bhakti. It's subtle, but it's taking, the undergraduate Bhagavad Gita lesson into the graduate level. Now I'm going to, commentary on that verse is found in a number of places. I'm reading from Jiva Goswami's Bhakti Sandarbha that speaks about this verse. Yeah. And it's like several pages long. Bhakti Sandarbha, Anuchhed 173. It's, it's just this one Anuchhed has about 8 pages. Bhakti Sandarbha is very profound. So Jiva Goswami is taking, among other things, this section of Uddhava Gita and drilling down and down and down, and what are the elements. So the particular section I'm reading from has to do with faith, because in Uddhava Gita, chapter 20, faith is really important. And faith, Krishna teaches, arises from association with devotees, specifically faith in hearing topics about me, because that's what we're doing, hearing topics about Krishna, Krishna's teachings and his devotees and so forth. And when one has acquired or developed some faith in hearing topics of Krishna, the teaching in this section of chapter 11 is the mind that is now colored by the modes of nature, and coloring mind doesn't see things properly. You see things filtered. You see according to the filter. You see blue or green or red or yellow, like lenses that are tinted instead of clear and transparent. So the mind is like that. And hearing with faith has the hearing message has potency. Faith focuses that potency and enhances the purification of the mind, the intelligence, and the soul. The soul's orientation moves from trying to become the enjoyer of matter according to the modes to seeing matter as meant for Krishna's service. And the strength for that purification, the whole section is faith in the topics of Krishna and hearing with that kind of attentiveness. So now he's going into Shuddha Bhakti. The complete condition of faith is described as follows. Quotes Brahma Vaivarta Purana. One may wonder if the praises of bhakti are true or not true, O king. On considering the matter, when one rejects that the statements are untrue, one's faith becomes perfect. The doubt. And on the strength of faith, the doubting consideration is set aside. And then it's faith that's perfect. Bhakti should be performed with such faith. Quoting from Uddhava Gita, chapter 20, as long as one does not become detached from daily and periodic duties, daily, let's say periodic duty is observing Ekadasi. And what you do when it's Ekadasi is a periodic duty. And then daily is taking a bath and applying tilak and etc., etc. The daily. So as long as one does not become detached from daily and periodic duties, or has not awakened his faith in hearing topics about me, one must perform one's prescribed duties of Varnasrama. Now, in this section, there's lots of discussion about all of this. The function of Varnashram, the function of prescribed duties, the function of prescribed duties for persons who are not yet pure, the function of prescribed duties for those who are pure. Like Krishna argues in Bhagavad Gita. You want to become like leave the battlefield. That's your predisposition, but you shouldn't have that. You don't have the adhikar to do karma sannyas. And those that do have the adhikar to do karma sannyas, they still do their prescribed duties. Janaka and others, because they're setting example. So perform your prescribed duty. But perform prescribed duty in a way that it's because I'm asking you to do it. It's your duty. Anyway, so this is taking it in another level. In the discussion between the Lord and Narada, qualification and lack of qualification is established. The Lord, on the one hand, says, from Bhagavad Gita 3:26, the wise man should not disturb the intelligence of the ignorant attached to the results of their work. Engaged in all work with detachment, the wise should engage them in activity. However, Narada says to Vyas, 1:5-15, you have created a great disturbance by teaching a condemned subject to people already attached to material enjoyment in order to make them accept Dharma, thinking that what you have taught is real Dharma. They do not consider giving it up. Ajita says concerning qualification, Canto 6, Chapter 9, one who knows the highest good will never instruct a foolish person to engage in material enjoyment, just as an experienced physician does not give his patient food injurious to his health, even if the patient desires it. Paragraph. Though faith is the qualification for Ananya Bhakti, that faith does not arise in the ignorant. They are not the audience for instructions to give up karma and perform bhakti. But it is not a fault to give instructions to that ignorant person if one discerns some qualification from impressions of his previous birth. By acting otherwise is a fault for the instructor. Later it will be mentioned that this is an offense to instruct faithless people. Shradadani vimukte pi ashrinvati yas chapadeshaha. Now let us return to the subject. Having explained the qualification for karma, jnana, and bhakti, the Lord instructs that even karma should lead to worship of the Lord. And he quotes Krishna speaking to Uddhava 11:20, 11 through 21. So Uddhava Gita is really far out. Okay, so here, O Uddhava, a person who is situated in his prescribed duty, properly worshipping by Vedic sacrifices, but not desiring the results, will not go to the heavenly planets. Similarly, by not performing forbidden activities, he will not go to hell. And the next is this key verse. One who is situated in his prescribed duty, free from sinful activities, and cleansed of material contamination, in this very life obtains pure knowledge, or by fortune, bhakti to me. Now, by fortune, yadrichchaya. It's an important word. Yadrichchaya is often translated as somehow or other, meaning something that doesn't have a cause. You can't say, this is the effect, and that's the cause. How does it come about? Yadrichchaya, somehow or other. And this phrase, yadrichchaya, is used in Uddhava Gita to describe the association with the devotee. What's the cause of someone getting association of devotee? Yadrichchaya. It's the quality of compassion of the devotee, but why the devotee goes to this person and not that person? Yadrichchaya. So the good fortune is this yadrichchaya, by which bhakti awakens, is association of devotees. So now with that in mind, I'll read the verse again. One who is situated in his prescribed duty, free from sinful activities, and cleansed of material contamination in this very life, obtains pure knowledge. So there are different ways of getting knowledge. This is the Vidya Shakti, by the way, spoken of earlier in this 11th chapter. Vidya Shakti is knowledge by which the conditioned soul becomes liberated. That's, Nitya Baddha. But the liberated, you can't stay there without shelter, right? You can't stay there without shelter. So without shelter means without bhakti. Because you enter into Brahman realization, you can't stay there. Vidya Shakti leads to another impermanent. That's the point. So there's persons that are eligible for gyan. And by that gyan, they may achieve pure knowledge. But then it's impermanent because there's no shelter. The conversation is to go beyond gyan and its trappings of the allurements of gyan, because people, isn't it, in this world, people value a learned person you looked up to, always very wise, etc. And there are persons that are fooled by that perfect knowledge and think, the goal is Brahman realization. and they're like convinced. And try to say to, if they don't have faith, they don't have association with devotees, that's it. And even if they have association with devotees, they're still kind of like stuck in where their faith is. There's this celebrated event where Ramanujacharya had an 18-day debate with a staunch Mayavadi. And Ramanujacharya was not just a fellow. He's an empowered personality, pure, empowered personality. 18 days. So when he convinced him, it wasn't just, I'm right and you're wrong. He moved his conviction to the position of bhakti is the answer, or the lotus feet of the Lord is the answer. Then it's beyond this kind of gyan that followers of Shankaracharya have. Or going back to this earlier discussion in the chapter, Gyan Shakti, that leads to liberation. So pure knowledge that leads to liberation, but it's a liberation that's impermanent. Aruya Krishena Param Padam Tada Patant Yudod Yadvada Yushmadangraya. Having not taken shelter of the lotus feet of Krishna, they come back. Continuing. The commentary says, quote, Anashi kama means desiring no results. Anashi kama means desiring no results. Other desires are rejected. It's not desiring the lotus feet of the Lord, it's desiring no result. It's negation. Knowledge in the negation sense. There are two methods of going to hell. One, not following prescribed rules. Two, performing forbidden acts. One does not go to hell by being situated in one's dharma and avoiding the forbidden acts. Desiring no results, nashi kama, means not even desiring swarga in this body. A person who has given up forbidden acts, anaga, who has eliminated impurities like material attachment, attains pure knowledge. Or, by chance, bhakti. To me, this indicates that bhakti is rarer than gyan. Paragraph. Not desiring results is done with the understanding that this is the Lord's order. In association with jnanis, one offers the results to the Lord. In this way only, in association with devotees, one then strives to satisfy the Lord with the offering. By the good fortune of mercy in association of devotees, such a person attains bhakti. Quoting 2:3:11. That's that chapter 3 of Canto 2, that's pure devotional service, change of heart. Auspiciousness arises for the worshippers of devatas if firm devotion to the Lord arises in them from association with devotees. Unquote. Thus, different qualifications for karmarpanam, worship through karma, kevala gyan, absolute knowledge, and kevala bhakti have been established. One should act according to qualification. Now, this Bhakti Sandarbha Anuchade is just taking what's in this section of Uddhava Gita and plunging into it in a deep way. Bhagavatam 11:21-2. again, it's Uddhava Gita. Krishna says, being fixed according to one's qualification is a good quality. And to be fixed in something not of one's qualification is a bad quality. That is how good and bad are determined. Like Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, better to perform your own duty, even if imperfectly performed, than somebody else's. Yeah. Later in this book, in the discussion of offenses, we will explain how teaching faithless persons is an offense to the Lord. Now we will return to the discussion at hand. Let me go ahead, a little preview of where this conversation is going. Text 22, 11:11:22. My dear Uddhava, if you are not able to free your mind from all material disturbance and thus absorb it completely on the spiritual platform, then perform all your activities as an offering to me without trying to enjoy the fruits. Then next, 23:24. My dear Uddhava, narrations of my pastimes and qualities are all auspicious and purify the entire universe. A faithful person who constantly hears, glorifies, and remembers such transcendental activities, who, through dramatic performances, relives my pastimes, beginning with my appearance, and who take full shelter of me, dedicating his religious, sensual, and occupational activities for my satisfaction, certainly obtains unflinching devotional service to me, the eternal personality of Godhead. I'm just giving you a picture because we're going to be spending the rest of the week going over this in more detail. Purification, to go from mixed bhakti, where there is knowledge, to go to Shuddha Bhakti, where it's just simply surrendered to the personality of Godhead. And what it looks like and the way to get there. Now, starting with text 26, Uddhava asks, my dear Lord, O Supreme Personality of Godhead, what type of person do you consider to be a true devotee? And what type of devotional service is approved by great devotees as worthy of being offered to your Lordship? Because he said, if you're not there yet, if your mind is not able to be fixed upon me, then do these two things. Offer results to me, work, but offer your results of your work to me, and hear about me. So then the question here is, who is such a person? And what is it that they can offer to you? What's acceptable to you as something being offered to you? And those that have achieved that stage of perfection, what do they recommend? 3 questions. That's my dear ruler of the universal controllers, O Lord of Vaikuntha, and Almighty God of the universe, I am your devotee. And because I love you, I have no other shelter than you. Please therefore explain this to me. But what type of devotional service is approved by great devotees as worthy of being offered to your Lordship? It's a continuation of Bhagavad Gita's discussion. Sarvadharmam prityaja mamekam sharanam braja. And then what's preliminary to that? If you're not ready to let go of prescribed duties as the topmost position, because it's not your adhikar, you don't have the qualification, then there are some recommendations. And the recommendations aren't different than the recommendations in Bhagavad Gita. But Krishna is explaining it here to Uddhava in more detail. Because Arjuna is a pure devotee and Uddhava is a pure devotee. Arjuna is more of a warrior, and Uddhava is something like Krishna's father, Vasudeva. Vasudeva is of the royal family, and Vasudeva had a brother named Devabhaga, and Uddhava was his son. So Uddhava is like Devabhaga and Vasudeva. They're not military men. They're Kshatriyas, but they act more in the capacity as ministers. That's what Uddhava did with Krishna. He was acting like a minister. He didn't have bow and arrows and a chariot to go to battle when needed. He was a different type of Kshatriya. So Krishna's explanation to Uddhava is a different type of explanation. Principles are not different. The way that they're presented is appropriate for the person. And appropriate for us is, or people in general, is Bhagavad Gita. And graduate study for Vaishnavas, as they become more and more Brahminical in inclination, is Uddhava Gita. And it's very subtle. The principles haven't changed. It's just the way that it's presented is more refined, more detailed. And it takes a while. It's my experience, as it took a while to get used to the language of Bhagavad Gita. But after getting used to the language of Bhagavad Gita, it's very simple. And similarly, Uddhava Gita is like that. It's a little difficult to pick up on the subtleties of what's being said, but after reading again and reading again and reading it again, it starts to become more clear. The essence is Krishna wants to take us to Shuddha Bhakti. He wants us to come to the position of unmixed Ananya Bhakti. And that's Uddhava's question, and that's what Krishna is delivering. It's to help take us to Ananya Bhakti. It's spoken of, the very language, Ananya, Mai Chananya Yogena Bhaktir Avyabhichalini, spoken of in Bhagavad Gita. And then this is, a very slow motion, detailed, step-by-step process of getting there from different stages of, just like this Bhakti Sandarbha text that we read from, Gyan, Karma, Gyan, and Bhakti, Kevala Bhakti, Kevala Gyan, and Karma. And there's colors or stages in between. Okay, so it's 8:30. Let's see if there's some discussion, and we'll continue tomorrow morning.
There's one online question, Maharaj.
Okay.
From Sneha Valli Mataji. So her question is, Hare Krishna Maharaj, my question is related to jnanis. It's a two-part question. First, we are hearing in the commentaries that jnana and karma process are fruitless.
Are fruitless.
Without bhakti.
Without bhakti.
I would like to know why Srila Prabhupada calls jnanis as transcendentalists like devotees. Is it because they know one aspect of Krishna, which is Brahman? Second.
Whoa. Is it because, say the last part, because she's very particular in her choice of words.
I would like to know why Srila Prabhupada calls jnanis as transcendentalists like devotees. Is it because they know one aspect of Krishna, which is Brahman?
Yes, it's detachment because of that simultaneously knowledge of Brahman, Aham Brahmasmi, or Brahmabhuta, knowledge of the self as the soul, distinct from the coverings of the soul. They're transcendentalists. Now, sometimes different language is used as worthless or fruitless without bhakti, as you referenced. You can look at in Canto 5, Chapter 5, where Rishabdev is teaching his 100 sons. He uses this language, tamodwaram ahor vimuktes. So vimukta means liberation. And Prabhupada writes in the purport, there are two categories of transcendentalists that come to that stage of liberation. And one of course, is the bhakta, but the other is those who are Brahman realized. He very generously calls them transcendentalists. Two categories of transcendentalists. And they're dwaram, they're gates to mukti. However, there are many, many, many more places where the emphasis is without bhakti, minus bhakti, that path of Gyan is fruitless. So, the two things. In different contexts, Prabhupada will make one point, and another context, another point. And they may seem to contradict one another or not be saying the same thing, this point and that point, this explanation, that explanation. It's for sake of emphasis. So you've understood correctly that why Prabhupada uses this term transcendentalist is because, yes, they have some understanding of the Brahman feature, then go the other way. But understanding the Brahman feature is not enough, because one will fall down. Same as this, what we're hearing in 11th chapter of 11th canto. It's an upadhi upon the soul. It's less than complete. And the complete is where there's shelter in Krishna. Then it's not incomplete.
So just a continuation to that question. Do these jnanis include contemporary scientists, philosophers, and also Shankara's followers, because they all know Brahman?
Well, yes and no. I mean, what scientists and philosophers know Brahman? Even theoretically, what to speak of practically. And for that matter, Mayavadis. Which Mayavadi practically, not just theoretically, understands Brahman? Their definition, the Mayavadis, is definition by negation. It's not understanding what Brahman is. It's just definition. It's not this, not this. And how many scientists and philosophers are involved in the not this, and come to the conclusion of Brahman? So your conception of who this includes is a little bit of a stretch.
So there is a comment from Gail Mataji. You actually answered my question before I asked it and gave direction on how to proceed. Thank you. Gail Mataji. There's one more question from Radhika Mataji, Sri Radhika Mataji. In the beginning of Srimad Bhagavatam, Vyasadeva clearly outlines that this literature rejects cheating religion and is not written for those interested in material enjoyment. Yet, as a Falastuti, at the end of several pastimes, such as Maharaj Prithu pastime, I read with the children this morning. I read with the children this morning.
Uh,
There are various material benedictions. Material benedictions. Why are such benedictions given?
Nice question. And your question, to support your question, aside from that Dharma Projita Kaita Votra statement, it's right in what we just read. A learned person will never encourage a materialist to do material things or to strive for material gain. The Bhagavatam kicks that out, so why is it there? One answer that I have heard specific to that kind of material benediction that's offered is to induce people who do have, despite the nature of the Bhagavatam's purity, they do have material affinity. And for those that do have material affinity, although what the Bhagavatam holds for the reader is way beyond that whatever material affinity can gain for you. It's true that those who engage in devotional service, Krishna may give that which one has material affinity for. But that's not the gift of Shuddha Bhakti. But one may need the material affinity perk to keep going to come to the stage of Shuddha Bhakti. I'll say the same thing in a different way. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu teaches na dhanam, na janam, na sundarim, etc. Mama janmani, janmanishvare. I am fine taking birth after birth. Just give me your causeless devotional service. That's the purity that's from that first verse of Srimad Bhagavatam. On the other hand, aspiring for going to Krishna is good, Prabhupada explains, especially in the beginning. Although aspiring for liberation is the last snare of Maya. So those who are pure devotees, even if offered the 5 kinds of liberation, including the 4 kinds of Vaishnava liberation, it's no thank you. It's no thank you in the sense that they all they want is unmixed devotion. But of course, if Krishna wants you to be with him in the spiritual world, we're happy to go. And Prabhupada writes, in the beginning stage, it's very good to hanker to be with Krishna in the spiritual world. And that stage may come for any one of us. Krishna, you can do with me as you like. You can have me take birth anywhere you like, in any form of life you like, as long as I can be engaged in your service. That's the higher position. Supposing one isn't there yet, then there's encouragement. Come to me. Krishna wants us to come to me, come to him, so let's go. So similarly, this is circling back to your question. It's not regular, but there are sprinklings here and there of benedictions that appear to be on the material side. And again, liberation is on the material side. It's just a negation of everything else. So people aspire for that. But bhakti is the way. Akama, sarva kama va moksha kama udaradi. That verse, I think, will help you understand. That's it. Anything in the room? Yeah? We have a little portable microphone. He's going to bring it. So our remote people can hear.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Faith is important, very important. Only faith. According to the faith, only faith is very important, because according to the faith, we are getting the knowledge, and pure knowledge, capable of knowledge, and then avidya. Vidya and avidya, same. But its key role is the faith.
It is what?
Faith,
Key role is faith. And then faith in what?
faith, yeah,
So faith and the object of faith.
object of faith. Yeah, even though demigods, they helping to the Lord for their pastimes,
Yes,
and they back to their abode, they are not going to the.
that's right.
It's because of the faith, or
Because they have
their
mix.
misfortune.
Because
what?
they have mix. Because they're not Shuddha Bhaktas. There's not Kevala Bhakti yet. They're devotees. And they want to assist the Lord in His pleasure. And they have desire. It's for example, the Nala Kuvera and Manigriva went back and became sons of Kuvera. Or the Vidyadhara, who became a serpent and was delivered by the touch of Krishna's foot, went back to Vidyadhara Loka. But in that condition, they're now Shuddha Bhaktas. So they're going to give Shuddha Bhakti to the people in those places they went to. And these demigods who went back to their demigod Loka, they're purified by being in Krishna's association in Vrindavan, assisting him in his pastimes. They become elevated. However, it's not necessarily they become Kevala Bhaktas. Like, for example, Indra and his offense to Krishna. He got Krishna's association, etc. But he goes back to Indraloka, and he still makes his boo-boos in Indraloka because he's not in that stage yet. However, one who's in that stage, they go directly to the spiritual world. They go directly to the spiritual world. So there's all kinds of gradations for those who are engaged in service to Krishna, us included, but demigods included. There's gradations. So now back to the starting point. Faith is what's imperative. And faith that my mission in life is to come to the stage of Shuddha, or completely pure, where there's no other interest. And for most of us, we're not there yet. And so we associate with this process of hearing and chanting to become pure, so that faith goes higher and sustained, not temporarily and then back down again. Then the faith in the hearing and chanting process nourishes bhakti, keeps us going. But Bhaktivinoda Thakur's teaching on this point is that faith has to remain, he uses the word hot as opposed to cold, or enthusiasm, that sustained enthusiasm and doesn't become cold. Become complacent and become, indifferent to the object, Krishna, even as we're doing our service, whatever that service might be. Deity worship, cooking, Sankirtan, kirtan, etc. Faith, when it's matured, comes out in the form of faithful service, not just doing over a period of time, but where there's this intensity of wanting to be in our eternal relationship with Krishna again. that we read this nice definition. When faith is in this complete stage, no duties. It's just love. Things will be done, but it's not on the platform of duty. No, it's good to get to the platform of duty. That's mode of goodness. And it's better than good to go to the place where it's no longer required because the mind is pure. So their mind is not pure, therefore they go back. Anything else? More?
Edrichaya, we have to faith, and then also we have to depend on like Edrichaya.
Yeah. Yes, that's right. Or saying the same thing, how Lord Chaitanya said to Sanatana Goswami, it covers a section of Chaitanya Charitamrita, but bhakti begins through association. It gives many, many verses. And then says, even in the perfected stage, in the mature stage, bhakti is imperative, association is imperative. Not just hearing, but sadhu sangha. I mean, when you're with sadhus, that's what you're doing, you're hearing. But it's the association of those who are carrying that bhakti. Sadhu sangha is imperative. Even topmost stage, imperative. Anything else? Okay, and then we're going to end.
This is from Gaur Kishore Prabhu. Hare Krishna Maharaj wanted to know till which stage of bhakti there are no chances of fall down. We saw devotees fall down from bhava stage like Bharat Maharaj.
It's in Madhurya Kandambani, is the prema stage. Okay, Prabhupada ki jai.
So, Maharaj ki.